Hello once again. This is Jeff Scott of Rankin Technical College, and I've been going over the PowerPoint presentations for the textbook Web Development and Design Foundations with HTML5 7th edition by Terry Felk Morris. We're up to the 14th and last chapter of the book, which begins on page 557 and is entitled A Brief Look at JavaScript and jQuery. And again, please be cognizant of the fact that, as it says, this is a brief look. When we get done with this book, we will go into a book that is solely on JavaScript. So this is just a primer or whatever you want to call for it. So our objectives: describe common uses of JavaScript in web pages, describe the purpose of the Document Object Model or DOM, and list some common events, create a simple JavaScript using the script element and the alert method, use variables, operators, and the if control structure, create a basic form validation script, describe common uses of jQuery, describe how to obtain jQuery, use jQuery selectors and methods, configure an image gallery with jQuery, and describe the purpose of jQuery plugins. So again, this is an introductory chapter to JavaScript and to jQuery, which is a JavaScript library. We've already mentioned in a previous chapter that JavaScript, it's a scripting language. It's object-based, which means it has object-oriented programming functionality which you can choose to use or not use. All right, it's used to work with objects associated with a web page document. And again, it's a scripting language. Normally, most of JavaScript is used on the client side. It is possible to use JavaScript as well on the server side. Again, you've heard this before in a previous lecture, but when JavaScript was originally created, it was referred to as LiveScript. But the people from Netscape asked Sun Microsystems if they could kind of leapfrog on the idea of Java and call it JavaScript. That said, as the bottom bullet says right here, and it's very, very, very important that you realize this, JavaScript is not Java. All right? So here's some common uses of JavaScript: displaying message boxes, selecting list navigation, editing and validating forms, creating new windows, creating image rollovers, status messages, displaying the current date, and performing calculations. All right. JavaScript statements can be created and basically set up in two different ways. They can be coded within what are called script tags, where they're internal to a document, or they can be created as an external file. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to very quickly come in here and start to create a very, very extremely simple file here. So it's going to be an HTML file, but we're going to put JavaScript in it. Let's see. Now again, this is going to be unbelievably simple. And what I'm going to, what I'm going to do here is in my HTML form, which is right here, which I'm going to save. And for now, I'll just save it to the desktop. And I will call it index.html. Okay, so there it is for right now. I'm going to put a button in here, but I'm going to say type equal button, which we have not done before. All right, we're going to say name equals, and we'll just call it run. It's kind of a silly name, but it'll work fine. ID equal run. Value equal run, so it'll have the word run on it. And when we click that button, so on click equal, and we're going to run a file that's called, it's kind of a silly name, but display stuff. All right. So right now, this isn't going to do anything, but what I do want to show you is if I do come in and run this, there should be a button on the screen that says run, and when I click it, nothing's going to happen because I have not written that code yet. All right. So we want something to happen when that button is clicked. For right now, we'll just put up what's called an alert box that says hello. So I could write an external file where I put my JavaScript, or I can do it internally, which is what I'm doing here. And I'm using these tags that are called script tags. And inside of here, I'm going to put alert. In fact, I want to write a function that's called display stuff. Same thing that we have up there. And in here, I'm going to put alert, and I'm just going to say hello. That's it. That's everything. Let's see when we run this program and click the button if we get an alert box that comes up that says hello. Then we'll come back and we'll look at everything that's in here. There's our alert box that says hello. All right, not grand, not glorious, but let's take a look at the code that made this happen. So this is our regular doc type. This is all the stuff we've been using. There's nothing new there. We've got an HTML tag with our language set to English, our head tag, and inside of our head tag, we've got the title and a meta tag that says that we've got a character set here. Okay? And then we've got a body. And in that body, we've got this. We've got the button that comes in there that says that we should have a button on there that's called run, and it's got run on the actual button's face, but when we click the button, call a routine called display stuff. So it calls this routine. A function is just a unit of code that's ideally designed to do a single operation. Well, we're displaying something. So you put a function, you use the keyword function, you give it a name. Sometimes functions require information, and if they do, you put it in those parentheses. Functions have to begin with a curly brace, left curly brace, and end with a right curly brace. And inside of there, you put down all the statements you want to run. So that's one way we can do this. Now I'm going to do a file, save as, and I'm going to call this index2.html. Okay? All right. Now I'm going to grab that everything out of this script tag right here. I'm going to grab it out of there. And I'm going to put it into its own file. So I'm going to put that into here. Okay? And I'm going to call this, I can call it literally whatever I want. But since we call our function display stuff, let's call this display stuff.js. All right? Okay, so now I've got my function put in a separate file, but in here, now in the script tag, what I have to do is I have to say source equals, so it's kind of like how we linked together the CSS file before, but I'm going to say source equals display stuff.js, JS for JavaScript. And there's our beginning tag, and there's our end tag. Now let's see if it works any differently. So I'm going to save. That's already been saved. So I'm going to run this program again. This is index 2. I'm not running index 1 anymore. In fact, let's call this JavaScript example 2. All right. So let's run this. Notice JavaScript example 2, where the previous one was JavaScript example. Click run. Nothing happened. Well, that isn't good. Click equal display stuff. could be because I gave these all the same name. I don't know. It could have screwed up because of that. So I'm going to change that from display stuff to just display.js, which means that I have to change the name of this. So I'm going to come back over here, and where I have this display stuff.js, I'm going to literally just change that to display.js. Okay? And I'll bring it up again so you can see there was no sleight of hand or anything. So that's display. And now that says, of course I made a mistake. It says display. Display. So there it is. All right, so let's try running that one again. And there it is. So what I've shown you here is we can write the same routine, okay, which is to just for now, just display a simple message. And we can either do it with what we had in here with our original index file, all right, which said put the information internally right inside of my HTML file in between script tags, or we can put it externally where we have another file that we call that holds that information. As you'd hopefully guess, that is considered a better way of doing it because we want to segregate out. We want our CSS and .css files, our JavaScript and .js files, and our HTML and .html files. All right, so just a little intro to you so you see some of that. And that's what I showed you here, the two different techniques. All right, so there's one where it's inside of the script tag and the other one when it's put into a separate file. All right, if I went too fast or that doesn't make any sense, you'll really want to go back and read the chapter. And in particular for the stuff here, it's on pages 561, 562, and there is a hands-on practice on 562 and 563. All right? Well, what happens if you have an error? Okay? So in other words, I'm going to come back here and I'm going to come back to this file where I spelled alert. I'm going to accidentally or purposely put alert, which doesn't make any sense. It doesn't mean anything to JavaScript. All right. Notice when I had the T there, there's no special coloring here. All right. And when I put the P there, it doesn't look any different except it says alert. But now notice that when I run this, okay, and I want to close all these down. So when I run this now, and I click run, nothing happens. Because it's trying to call a function called alert that doesn't exist. So what do I do? All right. Well, one thing I can do is I can sit there and in my HTML file that's right there that I just brought up, when the program is running, which is right here, all right, as you remember, I can come in and hit F12, okay, and I can bring this up. All right, now I can come and bring up display.js. So I double-clicked on the file over here. Notice what it's showing me, alert, and it says uncaught reference error, alert is not defined. So what I'm doing is I'm coming in here and using the Chrome tools, I am debugging my program. You've never heard this story before, literally, so there's alert. And notice now it's not showing me any errors in here. Okay? And I come back. It's going to want me to go back literally into my file here and change it. Now when I come in and run the program, and again I can hit my F12, but notice now when I click run, it worked, and there are no errors that are being shown in here. Okay, now that was very simplistic. Sometimes the errors that you find are going to be a lot more egregious. They'll be a lot bigger than that. Sometimes it will take much more work to find them. All right. All right. Starting on the bottom of page 564, there is an overview of the DOM, or Document Object Model. All right. It says, in order for you to be able to really come in and be able to do a lot of manipulation using JavaScript, one of the things that you're going to have to do is you're going to have to learn and understand at least something about what's referred to as the Document Object Model, or DOM. An object is considered a thing. It used to be that when you thought about what an object was, it was a noun, a person, place, or thing. But sometimes, rather than being a thing, it can be a concept too. When you use the Document Object Model, the browser window, the web page document, and any element that's on a web page, all right, is known as an object. When a web page loads in the browser, the web page contains objects. It could have images, headings, paragraphs, all sorts of stuff, right? Form elements. Each one of these objects have properties that can be detected, and they can be manipulated using code. For example, a property of the document object is its title. Another one is the background color. There are different actions that you can perform on different objects. For example, the window object, we use displayed the alert. All right, this is what's known as a method. And just so you know, you say, well, what do you mean the window object? We didn't do this, but what we could have said on here, and I'm going to run the program again, you could have said here, window.alert. All right, we could have done that. Notice if I run the program again, run, there it is. Here's the old one, so I'm going to remove that. So this is brand new. I'll refresh the screen, and I click run, and it still works. The window object is the default object, so even though you can put it in there, most programmers don't, because there's not a reason to do that. On the other hand, if I want to write something on the web page, I use the document object. So I use document.write. Program now has ended. All right. So I save this, I come back, I do a run, launch it in Chrome, click this. There it says, see, hello. Now notice what happens when I click OK. Program now has ended. All right. So it shows me that. You go, where's the button? Well, if I just go back again and refresh the screen, it's back again. All right. Now, when we use that document object that I just showed you, that you must use the word document, because that's not the default object. Window is. So if I just put right here, just like that, and I come back in and I run the program again, let's get rid of these old copies, and we'll refresh, and I click run. Oh, it still worked. It might be that that's been cached. I don't know. But the write by itself should not work. And let's try this. Let's close it. All right, so I'm closing everything that's associated with this. All right. And if I want to run it, I can just double click on my HTML file. Click run. Well, it did take it with just a write, but it's always been that I found that you need to say the document dot. I know that anytime you have to say window dot, you can say it, but you don't need the window dot. All right? Okay. So every time you create a web page, what the system does for you behind the scenes is it creates a document object model that's associated with that web page. All right? As it says, it defines every object and every element on the page. It's done in a hierarchical nature, and it allows you to access page elements and apply style. Literally, if you know how to use the DOM, there literally is nothing that you cannot do as far as manipulating what's on a web page. So there you go. An object is a thing or entity. A property is a characteristic. So if I created an object, for example, that was called person. Okay, so I create an object that's called person. I could give it a property, a thing like height, weight, eye color, hair color, because those are characteristics or attributes of a person object. In much the same way, when you work with a web page, the background color is a property of the document, document.bg color. Okay? A method is a behavior or an action. So again, going back to a person, I could allow a person to eat. I could allow a person to sleep. I could allow a person to drink, something like that. But in the same way, when we've got a method, which again is a behavior or an action, when we do it with a web page, you already have seen at least one of these. You saw the document.write. JavaScript reacts to events. So kind of imagine it this way, that JavaScript is sitting there and it's waiting for something to happen, whatever that something happens to be. All right. So as the user is viewing a web page, the browser detects different things that happen, mouse movements, buttons being clicked, etc. And those are events. So an event is an action that's taken by a web page visitor, or it's something that just happens normally, because you can set up events based on time or whatever. You can set up an event for when the page loads into memory or when it's unloaded from memory, etc. So some of the major events are shown on the screen here and also in table 14.1 on page 567. So the click is when the user clicks an item. It's typically a button, but it doesn't have to be. It could be when they click a hyperlink, for example. Load is when the browser displays a web page. Mouse over is when you take your mouse and you hover over an item. Mouse out is when you stop hovering over an item. Submit is when you submit, you click a submit button on a form. And unload is when the page unloads in the browser. It occurs just before a new web page loads. So you use event handlers to indicate which event you want to target. I just gave you some examples. Now there's a hands-on practice of this, which is going to give you much more information on pages 568 and 569. Again, there's some of the events. We talked a little bit already about debugging, and I showed you the Chrome developer tools as opposed to the console there. All right. So look at that for what you think it is, it may or may not be worth, I guess. All right, variables. A variable is a place in memory that contains something whose contents can vary. All right, hence the name. Now, when you create a variable, there are rules that you have to follow. Variables must start with, I believe it's either a letter or a $sign or an underscore. You're best just starting variables with letters. And after the letter, the initial letter, you can have letters, numbers, or underscores. Okay? When you create these variables, they can't be a JavaScript reserved word. And if you go, well, geez, what are those? There's around 50 JavaScript reserved words. Sorry. Again, there are about 50 JavaScript reserved words. And if I go out and open up a browser window and type in type in JavaScript reserved words. All right, reserved words in JavaScript. And you can get them from a lot of different places. I'll go to W3 Schools. And there they are. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13. It's 39, 51, well, 13 times 5, it looks like about 63 words. Some of these words were purposely made keywords by JavaScript so no one would ever use them. Things like goto. Doesn't have really any meaning, but JavaScript didn't want you to be able to use it. But I can't come in and create my own variable and call it, for example, default, because that's already a reserved word to JavaScript. When you create a variable, you put var in front of it. And notice they say here var username and then username equal Karen. Document.write username. So that's going to write Karen on the screen. You can say, you can combine these into one line if you want and say var username equal Karen. Since Karen is a string, since it's not a number, you must put it in either double quotes like this or in single quotes. All right. Well, we saw how to use the alert. Okay. What if instead of an alert, which gives you information, what if you wanted to get information from a user? All right. Well, let's go back to that routine that we did before. All right, so I'm going to bring that back up again. And we'll bring up index 2. And we'll bring up, in fact, we don't even have to bring up index 2. We can just bring up display.js. All right, so instead of this alert with hello, I'm going to do this. I'm going to come in here and say var name equal prompt. What is your name? And we'll give it a default value. We'll just say John. All right. And then we're going to say alert hello plus name. Okay, so we've added a little bit of stuff to this. Well, let's see what this looks like when we run it. What is your name? Notice if we keep John in there, it'll come up and now say, hello, John. And there's no blank space in there. We'll put one in just a second. All right. So where we told it to say hello plus name, we want it to actually say hello plus a blank space plus name. That plus sign right there is called a string concatenation character. So I concatenate together hello and a blank space and name. If I didn't want to put that in there, I don't have to. I could put hello space right there. All right, so let's run it one more time, and I'm not going to keep John in there. I'm going to put my name in there. So run Jeffrey Paul Scott. And it comes up, hello, Jeffrey Paul Scott. Now notice if I run it again, and I put nothing in there, we haven't checked for it being blank. So it just says hello followed by nothing. All right. So that prompt is what you can use to elicit or get information from the user. You can work with arithmetic operators in JavaScript. Equal sign does not mean equality, it means assign. So if you do, this line literally should be read, assign 10 to quantity. Now most people will read that as quantity equal 10, but it does literally mean assignment. Addition is the plus sign, so you can use addition for, you can use the plus sign as addition when you're working with numbers, and you can use the plus sign as concatenation when you're working with strings. The minus is for subtraction, the asterisk is used for multiplication, and the forward slash, all right, that's right up above the control key towards the right hand bottom of the keyboard, that's for division. There are other operators that you can use. If you want to check and see if something really is equal to something, it's not a single equal sign, which means assign, it's a double equal sign. That means equality. This means greater, greater than or equal to, less than or equal to, and not equal to. Again, these are all things that we're going to go over in much, much, much detail when we get to the JavaScript book. All right? So you can use if statements in JavaScript. Let's put one of those into the program that we've been working with. So we'll go in here. All right, so we've got here, how about this? If name equal, double quote, double quote. In other words, if I left it blank, I'll put alert, hello, shy person, because you didn't want to leave your name. Else, which means otherwise, I'll say hello plus name. So we'll go back and we'll run this again. And you'll notice that if I leave it at John, it says hello John, exactly what you'd expect. But if I make it blank, it now says hello shy person. All right, so the way that that worked was it came in here and it said ask a question. This thing that goes into these parentheses, which are mandatory, is called a Boolean condition. It's something that's got to be true or false to the computer. This means if I assign nothing to the name, put this alert. But if I did assign something to the name, then put this alert. And the system doesn't know when you're doing this. So if I put something just stupid in there, like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, it says hello 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. It has no way of knowing. Also, if I come in there and run it again and I just put a space bar in there, I just hit the space bar once. Notice it says hello plus the space bar. All right. I'm trying to remember if JavaScript supports what's called the trim function or not. But I'm going to say here, I'm going to try it anyway, and I'm going to say var name equal, I'm going to say trim in front of this, which means get rid of any blank spaces at the beginning and any blank spaces at the end. All right, that's what I'm trying to do right here. So now, it doesn't like something that I just did. And it might be that it doesn't support, I thought that JavaScript supported the trim function, but I could be mistaken. Trim, boom, boom, because it's syntactically, it's okay. But I know it supports rtrim, which is the right trim function, and I know it supports ltrim, which is the left trim function. So 1, 2, 3. So let's try that. It still may blow up on me, I don't know. No, there's still something here that it doesn't like. So let's go, because I don't want to waste your time or my time. We'll put in here JavaScript trim function. JavaScript trim is a method, okay. Okay, so I was sort of wrong with the way I put it in here. So let's get rid of all this. We'll go back to that prompt statement that we had. All right, we'll get rid of all this other stuff that we put in here. Okay, but after we do that, I'm going to say, I'm going to say name equals name dot trim, which means get rid of any beginning spaces or any blank spaces any blank spaces at the beginning or at the end. Now I'm going to go back and run this again, and when you click run, I'm going to put in space, 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 and notice it removed those spaces and it now says hello shy person. Also, if I run this, if I run it again and I put in space, 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 JEFF, space, 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 and I click OK, it only has hello Jeff. It removed all the leading and ending spaces. But if I put in here hello Bill O space Hera, Notice, since that's not a beginning or an ending space, it keeps that space. All right, these are all things that we're going to be going over in much, much, much more detail in the JavaScript portion of the class. So that very quickly is a little bit on using an if statement. You can write your own routines. You've already used some built-in functions. Document.write. Write is a function. Technically, it's a method, which is a function that you write for an object. But you can write your own functions. In fact, we wrote that one. We called it display, or display stuff. We wrote our own function already. So you've already seen that. Now, you can use JavaScript to validate what's been written on a form. I should say there is a prompt practice on pages 572 and 573. All right. And a hands-on practice using an if statement looks like on 576 and 577. And a hands-on practice with functions on pages 579 and 580. All right. You can use JavaScript for form validation. So you noticed that we did use JavaScript for some of the stuff that we did earlier. I'm sorry, for HTML5, we used built-in form validation. We made fields required, etc. But you can do the same kind of thing in JavaScript. And there is a long practice on this on pages 582, 583, 584, 585, and 586. All right. Remember, don't forget accessibility. JavaScript doesn't always function for every visitor. It's possible for a user to disable JavaScript, or a user may be unable physically to click a mouse. So you want to provide other ways for them to be able to run your program and do things, whatever the things happen to be. That's pretty much it for the JavaScript part. Let's jump into jQuery, which starts in the book on page 587. Now, as we start on this, an important thing to realize here is jQuery is JavaScript. It's a JavaScript library, which means that it is a collection of stuff, a collection of really functions, methods, whatever you want to call them, that have been written to make your life as a programmer easier. It's free, it's open source, which means anybody can add to it if they want to. The jQuery API, or Application Program Interface, works with JavaScript to provide ways of doing things. Now again, we're going to get into this in more depth and breadth of coverage later, but here's some of the stuff that you can do with jQuery. And there's different ways that you can add jQuery. You can actually go out to the jQuery.com page and go to the download and download it and copy it. And when you download it and copy it, you can do it in two ways. You can do what's called a minified version, which is what they show here, which removes all unnecessary white space. It almost looks like it's crammed together on just a few lines. Or you can download the non-minified version. So why would you want a minified version? Because it's smaller, so it'll take less time to load into your web page. And if you're never going to change the file, if you're only going to use the stuff that's in it, you probably want the minified version. All right? So you need to inform the jQuery library when your web page's DOM, or document object model, has been totally loaded by the browser. And the way that you end up doing, I should say, if you don't want to load it yourself, you can use what's called a CDN, or a content delivery network, where you can go out and if somebody else has housed it, you can go and just add it to your program that way. If you do it this way, that's shown right here in the blue, you must be logged on. You must have an internet connection. All right, so this is the ready event. And as it says, it's triggered when the browser has loaded the document object model. All right, and the jQuery alias right here is the $sign. So you use that instead of the word jQuery. You could use the word jQuery also if you wanted to. Most people use the $sign because it's less typing. All right, after you do that, typically what you end up working with are what are called selectors, which indicate the DOM elements that you want to work with. jQuery has its own methods, which are actions that jQuery should take. All right, and on pages 589, or on page 589, they've got an example. It's a practice using the jQuery ready event. All right. So, jQuery selectors. Some of them are shown here and in the table 14.5 on page 590. These basically are equivalent to what are known as CSS selectors. So if I want to select everything, I use the asterisk. If I want to select all list item elements, I do it like this. This could be single or double quotes. It doesn't matter. If I want to select everything with a class, remember period for class, of my class. If I want to select everything with an ID, remember the pound sign for an ID, my ID. If I want to select all anchor elements, hyperlinks that are inside of a nav. If I want to select all anchor elements that are in an ID called resources. If I want to select the first list item, or if I want to select every other or every odd list item. Those are just some examples. jQuery also works with methods. And here are a couple examples. Click, when you click something. CSS, if you want to be able to add CSS. The next ones that are shown under the next four, fade toggle, hover, slide toggle, and toggle. What's neat about those is they allow you to do some fairly sophisticated work using animation. Okay. There's also ATTR, which gets or sets an attribute, and HTML, which gets or sets HTML contents. So there's a hands-on practice on 591, 592, and 593. And again, we'll look at that in class. On the bottom of page 593, they talk about creating an image gallery. All right, creating an image gallery and creating it using jQuery. We created an interactive image gallery using CSS back in Chapter 11, but the hands-on that's on pages 594, 595, and 596, all right, that uses jQuery and JavaScript along with CSS to create another version of this image gallery. All right, finally, really about the last thing that I believe that's mentioned in the chapter here, starting on page 597, are what are referred to as jQuery plugins. A plugin is something that either you create or somebody else has already created that you can literally, as the saying goes, plug into your program to give it additional functionality. And there is actually a jQuery plugin repository right there. All right, at plugins.jquery.com, which has hundreds of built-in plugins. All right, notice if you added all those up there into the thousands. And if you don't want to use those, you can create your own plugins as well. So this was a very simple beginning chapter. It was designed, there's a plugin, I guess, there's some plugin practice here. There's hands-on practice on 597 and 598, and another one on 598, 599, and 600. Go out to jQuery.com is the best place to find jQuery documentation. So again, this chapter was designed to be an introduction to both JavaScript and jQuery. And with that, we have finished this textbook, or the PowerPoint slides for this textbook. Thanks.